397 Maarten of St Maarten, Roman bishop and Christian patron saint of warriors, dies at about 81. 618 St Deusdedit Adeodatus I, Italian Pope 615-18, dies. 955 Pope Agapetus II 946-955. In 1111 Otto II, Count of Habsburg, one of the founders of the Habsburg family, murdered. In 1171 Baldwin IV, Count of Hainaut 1120-71, dies at about 63. In 1195 Conrad III of Hohenstaufen, King of Germany and Italy, dies b. 1093 or 1094. In 1226 Louis VIII, the Lion, King of France 1223-26, dies at 39. In 1228 Dirk I, ruler of Heinsberg Valkenburg, dies. In 1246 Berenguela of Castile, wife of Alfonso IX of Castile b. 1180. In 1308 Duns Scotus, Scottish philosopher coined the word dunce, dies at 42. In 1494 Melozzo da Forli, Italian painter, dies at about 56. In 1517 Francisco Jimenez de Cisneros, Cardinal Chancellor of Castilia, dies. In 1527 Jerome Emser, German theologian and antagonist of Martin Luther, dies at 50. In 1578 Johann Walter, German Lutheran composer, dies at 51. In 1590 Joost Jansz Bilhamer, Dutch master builder and cartographer, dies at about 49. In 1595 Petrus Opmeer, Dutch church historian and humanist Historia Martyrum, dies at 69. In 1599 Francisco Guerrero, Spanish composer and Catholic priest, dies at 71. In 1600 Natsuka Masaie, Japanese warlord b. 1562. In 1609 Elisabeth of Anhalt-Zerbst, Electress of Brandenburg, by marriage, dies at 44. In 1638 Johann H. Alsted, German theologist and philosopher, dies at 50. In 1658 Pieter Floriszoon, Dutch admiral, dies at sea in the Battle of the Sound at about 50. In 1658 Whitderwith, Dutch vice-admiral, dies at sea in the Battle of the Sound, at age 59. English poet and Puritan Paradise Lost, dies at 65. In 1694 Ulrich Huber, Frisian lawyer, law historian and polemist, dies at 58. In 1719 Mitchell Rule, French mathematician Rolle's theorem, dies at 67. In 1757 Pierre Proudhon, German composer, dies at 60. In 1773 Friedrich Wilhelm, Baron von Seydlitz, Prussian general, dies at 52. In 1793 Madame Roland Marie Jean Flippin, French revolutionary member of the Giondist faction, executed by guillotine at 39. In 1805 François Thomas de Baculard-d'Anord, French writer, dies at 87. In 1811 Charles Ferdinand Bentinck, Dutch military officer governor of Suriname 1809-11, dies at 47. In 1817 Andrea Appiani, Italian royal painter Napoleon, dies at 63. In 1828 Thomas Bewick, English wood engraver and illustrator A History of British Birds, Aesop's Fables, dies at 75. In 1830 Francis I, King of the Two Sicilies 1825-30, dies at 53. In 1833 Maximilian Stadler, Austrian pianist and composer and Benedictine monk, dies at 85. In 1858 George Peacock, English mathematician algebraic theory, dies at 67. In 1860 Charles Fellows, English archaeologist who discovered ruins of the cities of ancient Lycia and brought to Lycian marbles to England, dies at 61. In 1864 Juan van Halen, Dutch-Spanish officer and adventurer fought for Russia and in the Belgian Revolution, dies at 76. In 1873 Manuel Breton de los Herreros, Spanish poet and comic playwright, dies at 76. In 1876 Maria Vittoria del Pozo, Queen Consort of Spain 1870-73, dies at 29. In 1877 Amalie August of Bavaria, Queen Consort of Saxony 1854-73, dies at 75. In 1880 Jacob Edvard Gill, Swedish composer, dies at 66. In 1885 Johannes Nepomuk Klickspan, Dutch humorist and author, dies at 71. In 1886 Fred Archer, English jockey record 13x GP champion flat racing jockey 1874-86, 21x British classic race wins, 5x French classic race wins, commits suicide at 29. In 1890 Caesar Franck, Belgian organist and composer symphonic variations, dies at 67. In 1893 Francis Parkman, American historian and author Oregon Trail, dies at 70. In 1894 Michael King Kelly, American baseball, HOF utility NL batting champion 1884-86, NL runs scored 1884-86, Chicago White Sox, and manager Boston Beaneaters, Reds, Cincinnati KKS, dies from pneumonia at 36. In 1901 Maria Ann Bickerdijk, American Army Nurse Union, dies at 84. In 1905 Viktor Borisov Musatov, Russian painter, dies at 35. In 1908 Victorien Sardou, French playwright, several of which were adapted as operas Vidura, Tosca, Madame Sans Jean, dies at 77. In 1908 William Edward Ayrton, English physicist, inventor and electrical engineer, dies at 60. In 1909 Charles Bordes, French composer, dies at 46. In 1909 Eduard de Hartog, Dutch composer, dies at 80. In 1911 Samuel Wilkes, British physician and founding father of clinical science, dies at 87. In 1917 Colin Blythe, English cricketer 2,509 FC wickets, dies at 38 fighting during WWI. Prime Minister of the Netherlands 1901-05, dies at 83. In 1920 Salman Ansky, Russian-Polish Yiddish author Debug, dies at 57. In 1921 Pavel Ostgh Vízislav, Slovak poet, playwright, and translator H. Janikova Ina the gamekeeper's wife, dies at 70. 2123. In 1924 Sergei Lyapunov, Russian pianist and composer Lesgiker, dies at 64. In 1928 Moritz Stiller, Swedish actor and director The Saga of G. Starberling, Erotiken, dies from an infective pleurisy at 45. In 1933 Mohammad Nadir Shah, King of Afghanistan 1929-33, assassinated at 50 by Abdul Khalik during a graduation ceremony at a high school in Kabul. In 1934 Carlos Chagas, Brazilian sanitary physician, dies at 55. In 1934 James Mark Baldwin, American philosopher and psychologist, dies at 73. In 1935 Charles Kingswood Smith, Australian pioneering aviator first trans-Pacific flight, disappears on a flight over the Andaman Sea at 38. In 1935 Hans Windisch, German New Testament scholar, dies at 54. In 1941 Gaetano Mosca, Italian sociologist elite circle, dies at 83. In 1944 Walter Notny, Austrian-born fighter pilot Ace 258 aerial,